Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about organelles in a cell. As we go, as we learn about each of these five organelles, we're going to compare the cell to a house. If the cell were a house, what would each organelle be in that house? Right? We're going to make an analogy. Okay. So the first organelle we're going to learn about is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is just the thin shell that surrounds the cell. It's it's found in both animals and plant cells, in all cells, cell membrane. And what its job is, guys, is it lets certain things in and certain things out. So it transports nutrients into the cell and it transports waste out of the cell. Um, how does it do this? Okay, so it does this with this series of like channels um, called membrane proteins within the membrane that allow certain things in and certain things out. They're almost like the gatekeepers that allow some things in, some things out of the cell. You saw this. I'm going to quick leave the PowerPoint because you saw this in the video you watched at the beginning of class and near the end of the video. So this thing right here is the cell membrane. So watch in this example how it lets things in and out. So in that case, it kind of like envelops different things and brings them into the cell or lets them out. But it also works in a different way, as you'll see right here, with these membrane proteins, right? These proteins, these kind of like tunnels that allow certain things in and out of the cell. So the cell membrane, it's really important, guys. A cell is all enclosed, right? But the cell membrane is the only thing that can let nutrients in and can get let waste out, right? It's going to become important once you learn about how the coronavirus gets into a cell. Okay, so cell membrane. So the example, so if the cell is a house, what would the cell membrane be? Well, let's think about it. Like what in a house lets people or lets things in and out? To me, it's pretty obvious. It's the door, right? Like the cell membrane is like the door of the house, or you can say the walls of the house, perhaps. But it's what lets the things in and out of the cell. It's the function it plays. The next organelle, guys, is called a cell wall. A cell wall is only found in plant cells. Okay, so cell wall also surrounds the cell, just like the cell membrane. But the difference is that a cell wall is very hard and rigid. Which what that does, guys, is it provides structure and protection to the cell. The reason why plant cells need this and animal cells don't is because plants need structure in order to stay standing up. Think of like a flower, like the stem or the of a flower or the trunk of a tree, right? They're very firm and rigid and structured. And if you the reason why they're like that is because all their cells are surrounded by this cell wall. Um, you notice, guys, in the work you did last class, a difference in plant and animal cells is that the plant cells are all more like rectangular shaped. They're more layered. They look like bricks, kind of, right? And that's because of the cell wall. So the cell wall is surrounding each of these and kind of like making kind of a grid that provides structure for the cells. Um, so that's what a cell wall does. So what part of a house, if the cell is a house, what part of the house provides structure and protection to the house? What do you think? I don't know. Like for me, I feel like what provides structure for a house is the walls, maybe the beams and the ceiling, right? That's like the structure of the house. That's what a cell wall is. Okay. Next one is the nucleus. Okay, the nucleus is like the command center, the control center of the cell, right? It's kind of like the most important part of the cell. It's right here in the animal cell, right here in the plant cell, right? The nucleus contains all the cell's DNA, and because it contains all the cell's DNA, it controls all the cell's activities, right? So think of this: if the cell is a house, the nucleus is like your parents, right? Like your parents in your house are the ones who are in control in theory, right? They're in control. They're the ones who tell people what to do, making sure if there's something's broken, it gets fixed. They're the ones in charge, right? In the same way, the nucleus is in charge of the cell. So what's really important, guys, it contains the cell's DNA. What is DNA? You've probably noticed seeing this shape before. This is a picture or a model of what DNA looks like. DNA is in this structure called a double helix structure. It's kind of like a ladder that's all twisted up, right? And DNA is really important because DNA is like the recipe for what your body needs done. So all the cells in your body, right? You're made up of millions and millions of cells. In each of those cells, you have the same DNA. Each of your cells has the same DNA, and that DNA is like the instructions that your body needs to do everything. The instructions it needs to grow, the instructions it needs to digest your food, the instructions it needs to pump your blood to every part of your heart, every part of your body, right? Like it's the instructions you need. That's what DNA is. So I actually want you to put this in your notes, even that to make sure you understand like what DNA is in the nucleus. DNA is like the recipe that the nucleus reads in order to tell the rest of the cell and the rest of the body what it needs to do. Every person in the world has unique DNA. Every person in the world except for identical twins. So if you're an identical twin, then your identical twin has the same DNA as you. But everyone else has different DNA. Okay, the next organelle, guys, is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is where cell respiration takes place. You learned about cell respiration last year in 6th grade. In cell respiration, guys, both animals and plants do it, right? You can see, both animals and plant cells have a mitochondria. Mitochondria are shaped like this. And what happens is these mitochondria take in food in the form of glucose, which is sugar, and they turn it into energy. So this is where you have, that's why it's called the powerhouse of the cell, right? It's what makes all the energy you need in order to do anything, right? So some cells have more mitochondria than others. The cells that have more mitochondria than others are the cells that need more energy to work, right? So for example, the cells in your muscles, like your muscle cells, have a lot of mitochondria because your muscle cells are constantly moving and working out and like, doing stuff like that. So because of that, they need a lot of energy, which is why they have a lot of mitochondria. So mitochondria take food and turn it into energy. So if the cell is a house, what would the mitochondria be? Well, what in your house takes food and makes energy out of it? I would say maybe like your electrical generator or something like that, right? Something that takes like generators normally work, like you put like gasoline or petroleum or something in there and they turn it into energy, right? So you can, plug something into the wall and it turns on, right? So I would say maybe a mitochondria is like the generator in your house that provides energy or electricity for the house. That'd be like your mitochondria. And last but not least, guys, your chloroplast. A chloroplast is only found in plant cells, right? Because it's what does photosynthesis. And as you all know from 6th grade, plants do photosynthesis, animals do not, right? Photosynthesis is when a plant takes energy from the sun as well as water um, and turns it into glucose or sugar. So once again, it uses energy from the sun to make food. So the difference between mitochondria and chloroplast, guys, they're kind of opposites of each other, right? Mitochondria, go back a second, takes food to make energy. The chloroplast uses energy to make food. So when I think of like what would the chloroplast, if the cell is a house, what is the chloroplast? I would think a chloroplast is maybe like your oven. Like your oven uses energy, or maybe your stove, right? It uses energy in order to make food, right? Like you use energy to bake something and it comes out and now you have food, right? So it's kind of like a chloroplast in that way. Okay, guys. So what you're going to do once you filled in all these notes is you're going to continue on in this document and complete the next section that's going to ask you to make your own metaphor. So we just compared a cell to a house. I want you to compare the cell to something else. Um, Try to think of something that's very different from a house, like something totally different. And for each of these 5 organelles, explain, don't just write it, explain what each organelle would be in the analogy that you come up with. Okay? Keep following the instructions, and you should be all set.